All right, so this is fcheck. It's a program that comes with Maya. And it's basically, it allows us to look at an image stack. When we work inside Maya, we work just like in a 3D environment. We light things, we render things out, we animate things. And when we render it out of Maya, when we take it out of there to put it in something else, we bring it into a program called fcheck. And fcheck allows us just to see it. Okay, it's a really lightweight program. So this is one of the other classes. We'll just look at theirs and see what they have. Okay. So that's our Pacman. That's what we're going to be working on today. A couple changes. Now that's one of the other classes. This is the one that I created, and I'm going to let you guys decide which one you want to create. We'll just take a vote. So we can create the first one that you saw, which is just Pacman on a board going at it, or we can create this one, okay, by hands. Who wants to do the first one that we saw? Who wants to do the second one? Okay, so we'll do the second one. There's a little bit more complexity to it. Pretty much everything else is the same, okay? It's just a matter of the one was animating straight. This one's going to be animating on a path. The other one didn't have the little balls right there. This one has the little balls right there. Okay.
The other one looked 3D too.
Right, and this one is 3D. We actually could go into like the front view of this thing and just see Pacman kind of chomping down. So you have other options to that also. Okay, and that's where the fun of 3D is. This is pretty much the exact similar-ish assignment that they do in the After Effects class, where they do this little Pacman guy chomping. In After Effects, once you lock it into there, it's locked in. You can't really take it into 3D or shoot it from a different angle. In 3D, we can. Okay, and that's one of the things that you'll find is wonderful about it. Yes, sir.
Just we don't have to just do Pac-Man. We could just have like Pac-Man getting chased by a ghost or something.
We're gonna do Pac-Man, and then if you want to add something to it, then you can after. Okay, but as a group, we're gonna work on this one together. Okay, so first thing, make sure your computer is booted. If you haven't copied your preferences, delete the old preferences, copy your preferences in, and then boot Maya back up. And if you haven't copied them, then I'll go through that process again so you can see it again. Okay, so I'm going to the D drive, going into the Maya folder, and deleting the 2015 folder. And then I'm going into my folder, copying my 2015 folder, and then repasting that into the Maya folder. And then I can open up Maya. I'm going to boot up that. Okay, so we're going to use NURBS for Pacman. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to File, and we're going to go to our project window. Okay, every time that we start a new project, today's project is Pacman. Next week's project, we're going to start the actual first project, which is going to be a desk. We have to go and make a project folder. Okay, so we're going to go to Current Project and hit New. Right there. So we're going to go under Current Project, and we're going to name this, whatever your last name is, _ Pacman. So Sarcona _ Pacman is the name of mine, because that's my last name, _ Pacman. Okay. The location should be your folder. It should say, like mine does, D, whatever your last name is, 14, 2510, work. Okay. If it doesn't say that, you click the little folder, and you navigate to that area. Okay. Everyone's good so far? All right, then we just hit accept. All right, so now that we've done that, let's go through and save. File, save as. There's nothing to save yet. We're just going to save it. And we're going to call this your last name again, _ Pacman _ 01. Okay? Get in the habit of naming things with iterations. I think I might have mentioned that last time, but it definitely helps. That way you can jump right to it. Oh, version 4, that's the latest one. Go to it. Okay? So we just save that. Now you can go back and forth between different versions of Maya. So if you're working in 2015 and you need to go back to 2014 for some reason, you can do it. Just make sure that the features are not any different. And realistically, you just open it up, it doesn't work, then you just figure it out. All right, so we're going to go to create NURBS primitives, and we're going to create a NURBS primitive sphere. Okay? So create NURBS primitive sphere, and that should create a NURBS primitive sphere right at the origin of your scene. All right? Now, we want to take our sphere. This is what our sphere is right here, except it's, Pac-Man with his mouth closed. And we're going to look at it. So just hit F so you can zoom up on him. Okay. And we're going to spin around a little bit. And if you look at this sphere, you can see that one of these lines going down the Pac-Man head is a little bit thicker than the other one. Do you see that? Okay. That thicker one is actually the opening. On a polygon object, if it looks closed, typically it is closed. So if we had a cube is a closed object. If we had a sphere, it's a closed object. It's not that way on a NURBS object. On a NURBS object, there's always an opening. We could literally take this thing and we could, let's say it's a cylinder, it would be better touching, but it would have a seam here that we could open up and flatten out if we wanted to. Every object. So this sphere that we're looking at, if I go into this, you're not going to do this part, but if I go into this and I start grabbing the points here, I can actually open up this surface. So you see how I'm just grabbing these points and pulling that surface open. Okay? So that's why this is a good choice for us to make Pac-Man out of a NURBS sphere, because his mouth area is already open. Okay? So that's what we're going to do. But what we need to do is we need to take the mouth area that's facing up like this, and we need to rotate it so that it's facing flat. Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the rotate tool, which is E, right? And looking at this, not even looking at X, Y, and Z, not trying to rotate anything, just looking at this sphere, we want to take Pac-Man that's like this, and we want to do that to him, okay? We want to just take him vertically and just flop him on his side, okay? So what we're going to do is if I look at this circle, that circle looks like that's the correct way I want to rotate him, that red one, okay? Do you remember what the red signifies when we're doing anything in Maya? X, okay? So I know I'm in rotate, which is what I want to do. I know it's an X. Now how far should I rotate him to get him to go from here to there? 90, okay? 90 degrees. So we're going to go over to rotate X, type in 90, and hit enter. Okay? Another thing to note is as I hit enter on the numeric keypad, you'll see that my cursor still stays here. And if I started typing something else in, like I want to go to the move tool, so I hit W, you'll see that W types in. Okay? So if I hit the other enter, this one right here, okay, that one does this, where it gets me out of that box. So there's two different ways to enter stuff. Just be aware of it, because it'll really screw you up when you're like, why isn't the move tool going? And all you're doing is typing 100 W's over there. Okay? All right, so now he's rotated. Our grid, I always like to look at the grid as a ground. So I want Pac-Man to be seated on the ground. So any guesses of how far up we should move Pac-Man? One unit, okay? We're going to move Pac-Man up 1 unit. So what is the direction for up? What was it? Why? Because I want to know. So we're going to go to translate Y and just type in 1 for the translate Y. Okay? So all we've done so far, we've created a NURBS sphere. We rotated him 90 degrees in the X direction and moved him up 1 unit. Yes, sir?
How do you know that it's 1?
How do I know that it's 1?
Trial and error?
Its experience is that.
Okay.
That's why I didn't expect you guys to know it. But also, if I scroll down here to where it says Make NURBS Sphere, and I open this up, its radius is 1. Okay? Your radius, 1. So we're going to keep Pac-Man here, but what we need him to do is we need him to open his mouth. Okay? So if we go down to where we have the Make NURB Sphere and you click on the word Make NURB Sphere, you'll get this little box that shows you more options, okay? Now the way that we get more options, or the way we open his mouth, is the start sweep and the end sweep. The start sweep, basically we have, let's pretend we have this kind of shape, and it takes this shape and it goes like that, okay? Kind of like a donut, okay? Whatever you want to call it. So these two options here are going to allow us to open up his mouth. So the start sweep we're going to set to 45. And you should see his lower jaw has opened. And the end sweep we're going to set to, what do you think the 360 minus 45 is? 315. Okay. Now again, this is an animated thing. We render it out. We submit it. No one's going to know that it's actually 45 and 315. As long as it looks symmetrical, it's good. But it helps to be kind of OCD about some of this stuff. All right. So what we're going to do now is we want to open and close his mouth. We want to animate him opening and closing his mouth. So we're going to make sure, firstly, that we're on frame 1. If I look down at my timeline, there should be the number 1 on the far left being highlighted. Okay, so we're good there. I'm going to click on Start Sweep. Oops, sorry. Left click on Start Sweep, then right click and say Key Selected. And you'll notice that it turns a salmon color, right? I'm going to right click on End Sweep and do Key Selected, and that also turns that salmon color. That way that they're both keyed, so they both have a keyframe on them now. And Maya works with, we can set up auto key, but we're not going to. It works where we have to physically set a key. At this frame, we want the mouth open. At this frame, we want the mouth closed. Okay? So now we're going to go up to, I think 10 is probably good. So we're going to go up to frame 10. So click and drag until we get to frame 10. And then we're going to take our start sweep back to 0, take our end sweep back to 360, and then set keyframes for both of those values again, just by right-clicking and keying. Just clicking and dragging, we should see Pac-Man's mouth opening and closing. So what we want to do is we want to take this animation of that, and we want to do what's called oscillating, meaning he goes like this, back and forth, okay? So with our Pac-Man guy selected, with that Make NURB Sphere still highlighted and still lit, we're going to go to Window, Animation Editor, Graph Editor. Window, Animation Editor, Graph Editor. Okay, this opens up the Graph Editor. This is all of our keyframes. Right now we have 2 keyframes, okay, or 4 keyframes. So we're going to move our mouse into this window and hit F to frame it. And if we look at this, we can see that we definitely have some curves here. If you've used After Effects and you've played with any of the keyframes, you know that there are also curves in there. This is 10 times better. You can do 100,000 different things more than you can in that one. Okay, plus, look how big it is compared to the After Effects one. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to marquee these 2 lines. Okay, so we just marquee the center of those 2 lines. That selects them. Then under Curves, Post Infinity, we're just going to say Oscillate. Curves, Post Infinity, Oscillate. Okay, what do you think pre-infinity would do compared to post-infinity? Before, right. It's post-infinity is what's going to happen after the keyframes. Pre-infinity what happens before it. Okay, so if I'm animating a clock, instead of me going in there and animating and go tick, and then wait a few frames and go tick, and wait a few frames and go tick, I can set that whole animation up, and I can just say, every time after this keyframe, just keep doing that tick. And every time before that keyframe, just keep doing that tick. And it automatically loops it, okay? So that's one thing we're doing in there. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to click on this linear tangent. See the little straight line right there at the top? We're just going to click on that, okay? And these are just some little finesse things that we're doing to it just to make it look nicer, okay? So that's all we're doing in the graph editor, so we can close that. All right, but now if we hit play or we scrub in the timeline, you'll see that Pac-Man is now opening and closing his mouth. So what we want to do is we want to take Pac-Man and we want to give him some thickness. Okay? Now, there's no, in NURBS, there's no way to do what's called an extrusion where I just take this shape and I just extrude it and pull it in. Okay? So we're going to do something different. We're going to go, I have Pac-Man selected. I'm going to hold down the space bar. I want you to get used to using the space bar and get used to using all those hotkeys. We're going to go under Edit NURBS. It's like in the middle, the shortest one. And you're just going to click and hold so that it opens the menu. And you're going to go down to where it says Offset Surfaces, but you're going to go to the little box on the right. Okay? So you see this little box on the right of Offset Surfaces? You're going to let go on top of that box.
Where was Edit NURBS at?
Right in the middle of the hop. Okay? Most things inside Maya have what's called an option box. It allows you to go through and set certain settings before you get any further into that specific tool. Some things like putting a bevel, doing an extrude, you have to set certain things up beforehand. This one we don't need. I just wanted you to see an option box, see some of the stuff that's in there, and also know that the stuff that we're looking at we can change later. Okay? So if I realize I want a different offset distance or I want to change one of these options, I can change those things later. Okay? So just hit offset. And there we go. Okay? If I go back to that option box, and every option box has the same exact thing. This button on the left is going to do that tool and get you out of the box. So if I want to just offset, I'm good with the settings. There it is, the box goes away. If I want to keep the box open, there it is, I would just hit apply. And you'll see that it keeps the box open. If I had 17 different Pac-Mans I wanted to do this to, and I want to make sure that the settings are the same, then I could just hit undo, change my settings, and try it again. Until I get the right settings, then I can grab them all and do it to all of them. Okay? One. And the last one just closes it without actually doing the tool. So let me just make sure I have my offset back on here. There we go. Okay, so now our Pac-Man is obviously too big. Okay, this is like an enormous giant Pac-Man. So we need to make it smaller. Also, the new Pac-Man is on the outside of him, so now he's like going below the grid. I could grab this Pac-Man and raise him up and set that one on the grid, but that's like stupid. I don't want to do that. Okay, I like the size of this Pac-Man right here. I just want to have like an inset, like this. Instead of this offsetting outside, I want to offset inside. Does that make sense? Okay. So we just click on either one of these guys here, doesn't matter which one, and we and we come over to the channel box, and you'll see that there's an offset surface in the channel box. Okay? When I didn't offset, it links these two surfaces together. They rely on each other. Okay? This is part of history that we talked about last time. So under offset surface, we're going to click on it, and you'll see those are the options that we had in that toolbox. It was offset distance and the method. So we're going to change the distance to be a negative 0.2. Negative 0.1. I like that better. Okay. This is like thin Pac-Man. This is like, 6 months after he's been dieting. Okay. All right. So it's negative 0.1. Negative goes on the inside of him. So now he's kind of cool. You'll notice by his lips on the inside, there's these like black circles. Okay? What's happening there is as it's going, it's taking this shape and going in and making it smaller. You see what my thumbs do is they kind of like intersect. Okay? So that's what's happening. So we're going to take this method, and instead of surface fit, we're going to say CV fit. And you'll see that those go away. Okay? When I first did this assignment, I didn't know that that would do that, but I said, hey, that kind of sucks. And then I tried that and it worked, and I said, cool. That's how it works, okay? So now that we have this, we have inside Pac-Man, outside Pac-Man. Wonderful. Anything wrong with the picture?
They're not connected.
They're not connected. Right. Okay? Before we get into connecting them, I want you to note this. Hit the play button. Do you see inside Pac-Man is also moving? Right? Okay? Because of history, Maya remembers you made a NURB sphere, you animated those two properties opening and closing, and then you did an offset to the surface. And it takes that entire thing and it cycles it down all the way to what we're doing. Okay? So this guy here, it's constantly being updated because he's the offset. All right? So wherever he goes, he's just going to re-offset. He goes like small mouth, like that. The inside guy offsets. If I go into wireframe, I can see that that guy is updating the entire time. Okay? One of the great things about Maya. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to marquee both Pacmans, inside and outside. Okay? You have to hit stop too. If you haven't hit stop and then do it. Also make sure you're on frame 1 so we have a big mouth. We need the mouth to be open wide for this next step. Okay? It doesn't work if it's closed. We're going to hit F8, function 8. And what we're going to see is that we have a bunch of points on our Pacman. Okay? These points are called control vertex, or control vertices. And we don't want these. We want to go up here to our mask. Remember we had these different selection masks? I'm going to turn off the point one and turn on the line one. Okay? What I want to be able to do is select that lip. Okay? So I'm going to say, I'm going to click on this top edge, hold down shift, click on the other top edge. And you'll notice that we have two yellow lines, right? Good, happy, good. We're going to go back to the hotbox, hold spacebar down, and we're going to go to Surfaces Loft. And no option box, just go to Surfaces Loft. Okay? And then what we should see is that it fills that gap in. So we marquee the bottom, you'll see he's still in that component blue mode, so we can just do the same thing. Click one lip, shift click the other lip, and then go to Surfaces Loft again. Okay, so now that we have that in there, click off of it and then hit F8 again. Okay, now what we should see is if we click back on Pacman, that he then becomes green, or if we marquee it, we see green and white. Okay, that means we're out of component mode. We can also check up here where it says object mode right here in the middle. That would also make sure that we're in object mode. Okay, so it's very important again that we just make sure we're in the right mode as we start working on this stuff. All right, so now I'm just going to click off of him and hit play again, and you'll see again all those pieces are moving. Maya is remembering all the stuff that we did to this, and it's updating all of those things live. Okay, so it's constantly re-offsetting that surface and then re-lofting those areas between it. Okay, so wonderful, it works perfectly. So now what we want to do is we want to take our Pacman guy and we want to animate him going across that little board. All right, so we're going to switch to the top view. So we're going to hold down the space bar and we're going to click and hold right in there where it says Maya, and we're going to go over to the top view. Okay, so now this automatically takes us into the top view. We're going to zoom out a touch. And if it's hard for you to see, like my screen is a little bit hard to see that area, I can hit Alt-B and switch my background color. I prefer that background color when I'm working. So I hold down Alt and tap B, and that gets me a different background color. Okay? You don't have to do that. If you want to, you can. So what we have to do is we have to draw a path. And you may have done this in After Effects where we draw a path for something, and I say, hey, object, I want you to follow that path. Okay? So we're going to go under Create, EP Curve Tool, Option Box. Okay? This one we have to go to the option box before we start drawing it because we have to set some things up first. Okay? So Create, EP Curve Tool, Option Box. You'll notice, and mine did it anyway, is that my option box, my tool settings, popped into this window. I hate when that does that because what happens is, and it's so quick we don't even notice it, but my perspective view or top view or whatever I'm in kind of diminishes. This window pops in, things get resized, and it has to refresh it. It doesn't take too long, but when you get into bigger scenes, it's going to take a long time. So what I like to do is just take the tool setting box and just pull it off. Okay, let the tool settings float. This is a cool thing to be able to throw onto the second monitor and use it on a second monitor. We're just going to be in it and we'll be out of it. All right, we just have to click linear. That's what we want to set. So we just click linear. Okay, the difference between linear and cubic, why we're going back to it, is cubic is nice and smooth. Okay, so if I wanted a nice smooth curve, I would use cubic. If I want something linear like the Pacman movement, then I would use linear. I think I said that right. Okay, so we're just going to close it. Once we were in there, we just close that. And then we're going to draw the path. Now again, we want to be kind of OCD accurate about this. We don't want to just do this, which is just clicking a path for Pacman to go on, because it's not what Pacman does. Okay, we're going to hold down the X key. And if we go to our snapping on our hotkey area, X is grid snapping. So we're going to hold the X key, and we're going to click somewhere on the grid. Doesn't matter where you start. It's all up to you how you want to, where you want Pacman to go. Okay. So I held X. I clicked a point. I'm still holding down X. I'm going to click another point, and I'm just holding X, and I'm just clicking points, ensuring that I have a straight path. Okay. I want to also make sure that if you look at this one, you'll see if this Pacman is going here, there's not really a way for him to have like an opening, right? This is too narrow for Pacman to go down here and here because there's no wall between it, all right? So I'm just going to hit the backspace key and draw a bit of a bigger path so that I have more room for Pacman to fit down, okay? I'm also making sure I'm not doing this. See how that's kind of stair-steppy? I don't want that. So I hit backspace again and draw another one, just trying to maintain a straight path. There we go. Okay, so just something simple like that is sufficient. And when you're done, hit enter. All right, so now we have this. So now I want to get Pacman to move on that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch back to perspective. So again, I hold down the space bar. I hold down on the Maya, and then I switch to perspective view. Okay, so I'm going to get Pacman to go onto that path. And the way I'm going to do that is if I did this, marquee everything, and try to move him, watch what happens. All these pieces are separating. Okay? Any guesses as to why they'd be doing that? They're not grouped is one thing. The reason it's doing it is because remember that when I hit the play button, how everything updates? Okay? So everything is based off of this outer shell. So wherever that outer shell is, all those pieces will automatically follow. However, when I grab everything and try to move everything, what's happening is we're getting like a double movement. Okay? For instance, if I click on this outer shell and I move it, see how all the pieces go with it? But if I click the inner piece and let that go, that's fine. Well, it's stretching there for a specific reason. But if I grab everything, what's happening is I'm moving the outer shell and moving the inner shell, and it's redoing the offset, and it's basically it's freaking out because it doesn't want to move the way I'm moving it. Okay? So when we do something like this that's all based on history, we have to find that very root object and click right on the root. So we're just going to click on that outer shell and use that outer shell to be our animated object. Does that make somewhat sense? Okay. A lot of these concepts will come to you as you progress. All right, so we click on the outer shell. We're going to shift click on our path. And again, we're going to use the hotbox. Hold down the space bar. We go to animate, motion paths, attach to motion path option box. All right, so our options in here, right now it's set to time slider. Okay, and what that means is that where does he start, where does he end? How fast is he moving along this path? Right now it's set to time slider, meaning use the time slider as how fast he's going to go. I could also punch in a start and end. I want him to start at frame 50 and end at frame 80, whatever. Okay, we're going to do start and end, but we're going to set this to be 200. Okay, I did it, the one that I showed was at 120 frames, and I think he goes a little bit too quick. So we're going to set it to 200 and he'll go a little bit slower. There's also stuff in here like follow. We want to make sure that's checked. And then these other settings, the front and the up axis, basically it allows Maya to know where's the front of this thing. If this airplane is flying along a path, how does Maya know that the pointy part is the front? It doesn't, so we have to tell it, okay? So those options are good. We just hit attach. Okay, and what we should see is our Pacman, if we were more of a top view, is facing the correct direction. And if we hit play, he moves along. Now you already mentioned them, so you don't say anything. But what are some things that are wrong with this? Too fast? Right, he's gaining momentum. Okay, so he's actually starting off a bit slow, and Pacman doesn't do that. Back when they created Pacman, there was no like start off slow and build up speed. It was just like go. And then the other thing, he stops. Right, we don't get all the way to 200. Our time slider goes from 1 to 120. It doesn't go to 200. So we're gonna hit stop. Also, escape is the way to hit stop. And we're just gonna change this number here where it says 120. We can just change that to 200. Okay, and now we're playing the entire 200 frames. And he'll also, if we hit play now, you'll see that he starts to slow down at the end. Okay, and again, we want to eliminate that. Okay, everything in Maya has ways to edit it. Okay, there's always some way to edit even that stuff. When we edited his mouth moving, we grabbed the object that had the keyframes on it, and then we edited those things in the graph editor. We're going to do the same thing, but we have to figure out what is animated here. And the animated object is Pacman, right? That's what's animated. So we're just going to grab him and go to Window, Animation Editor, Graph Editor. Window, Animation Editor, Graph Editor. Okay. Now inside here we have a lot more stuff going on because there's a lot more stuff that we've done to this. What we need to do is click out any one of these in the left that say motion path. Okay. So on the left it says motion path. We just click on that, then come over to the graph and hit F. And what we'll see is that this is the graph. And you can kind of see, if you have a little bit of experience reading graphs, of what's happening here. At the beginning, we're going slow. In the middle, we're picking up speed, and at the end, we're slowing down again. So you might have experience just for fun. Any ideas of what the graph should look like?
A straight line.
Straight line, right? So that's what we're going to do. We're just going to grab it and then click the straight line, that linear tangents. Okay? And what that linear tangents does is just make the line straight. That's it. Wonderful. So now we close it. And then if we hit play again, those two issues should be fixed. So he goes at a constant speed now, and we see the entire animation. Okay? He still might be going fast. He still might be going slow. Whatever. All right? If I wanted to, just so you can see it, we're not going to do it as a group. But in the graph editor, I can actually grab one of these keyframes, like the last one, and I can say, instead of you ending at frame 200, I want you to end at frame 400 because I want you to go at a good speed. Or I want you to end at frame 60 because you're going too slow. Okay? So any of this stuff I can edit later and modify and tweak and do all this stuff too. All right? So don't think that at any point you're locked into something, but you just want to be aware of it. It's a good time to save our scene. So let's go to File, Save Scene. Okay? So now that we have this happening, what we want to do is take and add those little glowing balls to it, right? So we're going to go to Create. This one doesn't matter. Polygons or NURBS. We're not animating it, so it doesn't matter. Just create any kind of sphere. Okay, and then scale it down to an appropriate size. You know, how big would a pebble or a thing be for Pacman to eat? If you need to, hit stop so your thing stops playing also. Okay. We also want to make sure that it's not, critically important, but our scales, notice my scales are 0.24, 0.24, 0.24. I found that's a good size. If yours is 0.26, I don't care, okay? But they all should be the same. That way our sphere stays a sphere and not an oval or not some crazy shape, okay? Again, we can change this later. We're not locked into it, but just so you have a good start. Now, let me show you the bad way to put these spheres out here. If I duplicate it, and I do this, and then I scoot it over, and I say that's where a 1 is, and then I duplicate it again, and I say that's where another 1 is, and I duplicate it again, and I duplicate it again, and I keep duplicating these. I'm never going to get good spacing. Okay? There's just no way for me to get good spacing on these spheres doing this. Okay? So another way that we can do this is using a method that we've already done, but adding something else to it. Okay? Pacman follows this exact path. So let's get a sphere to follow that exact path, and then we could just duplicate that sphere at certain spots that we need it. Okay? So we're going to take the sphere, shift-click the path, and then under the animate button again, we're going to go to motion paths, attach to motion path. We don't need the options. If you need to open them to look at them again, you can, but just hit attach. And we should see that now that ball is going along the path with Pacman. Good so far? Okay. Now obviously Pacman and the ball are moving at different speeds. That's not going to work. If you remember how to fix that, go ahead and do it. If you don't remember, just watch up here. Window, Animation Editor's Graph Editor. And with the ball selected, I just grab that path and hit linear. Okay, so now if I close that and hit play, I should see basically that Pacman has that ball in his mouth the entire time. Okay, so now what we're going to do is make sure the ball is still selected. Mine was still selected because I didn't deselect it. Okay, and I'm going to take this, and instead of me physically going through and going to frame 5 and duplicating, and 10 and duplicating, and 15 and duplicating, I'm going to do what's called an animated snapshot where it does it automatically. Okay, so I just have the ball selected. Under that same animate menu, you'll see there's one called Create Animation Snapshot. I want to go to the option box for this. And once you get it open, you'll see some of the options that are there. Make sure you hit stop if your animation is playing. This is kind of a neat thing for motion graphics, for adding text, having something kind of cool happen there where you can kind of see the animation. So what we're going to do is just say the start and end, and just set the end time to 200, because that's how far we want it to go. And then for increment, it means how far do you want, how many of these things do you want. If I do it 1, that means every single frame it's going to figure out where that ball is and put it there. Okay, I'm going to say 2. I think 2 is probably a good range. And I can verify that just by kind of going, back and forth. Maybe not 2. Let's say 4. Let me try mine and just see where I'm at. Yeah, 4 looks good. Okay, so I hit 4 and hit apply, and then I can close this. Okay, and then what we should see is we have those little balls on our track. All right, so now that we have all of these spheres here, we don't need the one inside of his mouth. You'll see that we still have this one. Oops. And then as he moves, that one just kind of stays locked in. So we're going to hide this. And we didn't get to this last time. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a layer over here to just hide that guy. Okay. So I'm going to go to make sure that the correct sphere is selected, the one that's inside of his mouth. And then I'm going to click on this far right button, which is Create New Layer. Okay. And then I'm just going to click the V, and you'll see that V, by turning it off, hides that sphere. Okay, so if I go to wireframe, you can obviously see that a little bit better. Okay, not a big deal. All right, we can also double click the layer 1 and just call this Setup and hit Save. And basically all that allows us to do is just have a layer that we can just hide stuff. So if we realize we want to get rid of whatever, we can just throw it on there and hide it. Okay. Sometimes I even, before we put Pacman on the path, sometimes I would save that out That way I have an extra Pac-Man in case I ruin him, okay? All right, so we're good there. What we need to do now is we need to color this thing. No, it's not color it. We need to get rid of those spheres. So I want to hide all of these, but I want to do them as Pac-Man's going through, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to rewind it to frame 1. And I'm just going to delete this first one. I don't think I need that first one there. Okay. So this second one, I'm going to set a key on to animate its visibility. All right. So if we look over in the channel box, it says visibility on. We can see it. Visibility's on. We're going to right click on the word visibility and key select it. Okay. So we click on that sphere, we right click on the word visibility, and we key select it. Okay. Now we have to make sure that's one of these spheres, not our original one. So then what we're going to do is we're going to just go frame by frame, so we can just click and drag if we want, until we realize, hey, there's a good time for that item to disappear. Let's say frame 6 is where mine's at. Yours might be a different frame. Okay. Then I'm just going to turn this off and then set another key. Okay. So now if I go back and forth, I'll see that that sphere just disappears. Okay. There's always a quick way to do something inside Maya. A lot of times when we're doing stuff at the beginning, I try to give you the longest way that has a lot of repetition in it, and then we whittle it down, and eventually you get to that, faster method. But it may not always be the fastest method right off the bat, just so you understand things. All right. So what we're going to do is I'm going back to frame 1 so I can see that guy. There he is. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on the word visibility. I'm on frame 1, and I'm going to hit copy selected. Okay, so what that does is it copies those keyframes that we just set. The keyframes for sphere 2, sphere 3, sphere 4 are going to be identical with the exception of different time, right? So if I kind of guesstimate that when this Pac-Man guy was at the origin here, at this first starting point, we had one sphere, that when he gets to the center of this one, that it should be a good time to set keyframes for that. Does that make sense? Because it's about the same distance. Okay, so we're going to try that. So we're just going to move Pac-Man along until he gets to about the center, and it could be a little bit further. Okay, in this case I've gone to basically where my keyframe is. Frame 6 is where I'm going to stop. Okay, so just move your time slider until your Pac-Man is covering that sphere. We're going to click on the next sphere, right click on visibility, and paste selected. Okay, and then what we should see is that as Pac-Man goes through the next one, that next sphere then disappears. And you might have to go to wireframe to see it, like mine. Fatal error. And you might want to save just so you don't get a fatal error. So we're going to do the same process. So this one is 120 that we're looking at. I just changed my Pac-Man so that he's 200 frames long. There we go. But you'll see that now all those animation tweaks that we did to the ball are no longer updating. Well, again, this is all stuff that I could update if I just grab all the stuff. And I go to 200 here. There we go. I am going to just stretch out these keyframes. Make sure I grab it correctly. There we go. So now he should be pretty much in line with where those are at. Okay, so even though we set up these keyframes for one thing, there's nothing saying that we couldn't adjust our Pacman time and have to go back and update this. Okay, it's just a matter of understanding that whole process. Now, one thing I was going to show, and I don't know why this is doing it on this computer, my other computer was fine, is that even this process of clicking, adjusting our time, pasting, clicking, adjusting our time, pasting, all of that stuff that we're doing, even that could be expedited and become a lot quicker. There are commands that are inside Maya. So this is one of them called current time. And it's basically a command that automatically will allow me to jump to a different time. So if I knew that every 4 frames I was going to jump ahead, I could go down here where it says mel, this little mel area, and I could type in current time, let's say 10. Okay, and so what that does is it automatically jumps my time ahead 10 frames. So I could say lots of things inside here. It's 5. And I think that will do what I want to do. Nope. There's another script that I have that will actually do what I want to do. If I do this. This. Something like that, maybe. Yeah, there we go. So what that one was that I just put in there allows me basically just to jump ahead. So you see, just by making this button, this little script that I just wrote allows me to jump ahead 5 frames. And I could adjust that to whatever I want. I could also add things in there, like I could say, jump ahead 5 frames, and then grab the next ball and set keyframes for it. And then go to the next 5 frames up, grab the next ball, set keyframes for it. So there's actually scripts, and I'm just going to briefly show you this little resource. Creative. So this is Creative Crash, and if you're in Angel and you see on the right I have a bunch of links, this is one of those great websites, and it has a bunch of stuff in here for a bunch of different softwares. There's even After Effects and Nuke and Painter and Photoshop and all that stuff. For the Maya stuff, they have these things called mel scripts. It's basically like macros or little scripts that people have written to do lots of really cool stuff. And typically, if you're going to get into this kind of thing, you want to kind of play around with these. So for modeling, let's say, here's a bunch of different kinds of scripts that are available. And there's these ones. I think they're called Davy. These are all scripts that this guy wrote that generates pistons. And it's basically like you run the script and it's like, what kind of piston do you want? And you put in your specs and then you hit OK and it creates that piston. Not too impressive if you don't know what pistons are or even like pistons. But here's one for Legos. So he has one that's a Lego generator which builds Legos. And it's not like it's importing an already existing Lego. It's actually building a Lego from a script. Okay? So if you said I want a block that's 6 blocks and it has a hole in it or whatever, this Lego generator will automatically do it just by clicking a button. When you look at anything that Hollywood does, a lot of this is done with scripts and special utilities that they use basically on a per job basis. Okay? So one of the things that drew me to Maya when I got into it was how open it was and how if I wanted to play with scripting one day, I could play with scripting one day. If I wanted to work on cameras or lighting or texturing or modeling or animating or any of this stuff, I could do that. So just wanted to show you this resource because it's phenomenal. And here are some stairways. Okay, so these are all the little free plugins you could add to Maya that allow you to do that kind of thing. Okay, so now that we have our Pacman guy here, we're going to model the background for him. All right, so we're going to create polygon plane. Okay, and what we need to do is scale up our Pacman thing. Now we don't know how big this should be. Okay, it's going to be based on however your individual scene is. So in mine, I'm scaling this up until it kind of fits my maze plus a little bit more. Okay, so it's obviously a lot bigger than my scene. That's perfect. I'm going to round my numbers. So I'm going to round my numbers to 50. I'm going to go down my polyplane options and set my width and scale to the same number I set my scale to up here. My width and height divisions to the same numbers I put here. Okay. So figure out how big yours needs to be, scale it up that big, round it off, and then put the same amount of divisions in here. And again, this isn't something that I know that this is going to happen. When I created this for the demo, that's just something I fell upon. Okay. So we're going to hit 5 if you don't have 5 selected so you can see your stuff. And then we're going to right click on the plane and go to face. Okay. We're making sure we have this selected, the plane. Then you're going to hold down the right mouse button and then go to face. All right. Now this is going to give you the path or the faces so we can select it. On mine, I can no longer see where my path was, so I'm going to make sure I rewind to the beginning so all those little balls come back so I can see where Pacman is traveling. All right. And then what I want to do is I want to basically select everything except for my path. All right. So I want to make sure that if you look here at this example to this point, I can't grab one point here where that ball is. So what I want to do is be able to grab this whole thing like that. Okay. So I'm going to actually grab this there, this here, like that. And I'm holding down Control Shift. Control Shift is a way to just add to your selection. Shift does a toggle. Control Shift just does adding.
But you don't want to grab your Pacman.
Yes, you do want to grab your Pacman. He's going to be inside that area. Okay, if you have extra stuff, that's fine. But we have to make sure that he has basically a little tunnel for him to travel around. That means that over here, you didn't set this subdivision width and height to be the same thing as your scales. So my scales were 50. So my polyplane, I need those set to 50 as well. Okay, not the width and height here, but the subdivision width and height. Hold down the spacebar again. Go to Edit Mesh. And then under face area, it says extrude. We're going to just let go on extrude. So Edit Mesh, extrude under face. Okay. And we're going to get a funky little manipulator that pops up. Ignore the manipulator. Just come over here to the channel box where it says local translate Z. And we're going to put in -2. Okay. So what that -2 does is it pushes that ground plane down. All right. Now, if we needed to, let's say we needed to do something to the rest of this. You know, this bottom part's good, but I want to do something to the rest. I could use these hotkeys here. I could hold Shift and marquee it, and you'll see how we deselected the ground, and now we've reselected the top of it. Okay, so we're not doing anything with it, but just so you're aware of it. Okay, so do we have that pushed down? No. Okay, let me go back to where it was. Okay, we're going to go to Edit Mesh. Under the faces area, we're going to extrude. Okay, and then in the channel box where it says local translate Z, we're going to type in -2. Okay, now we're good. So we hit F8 to get out of there. It looks kind of, abrupt, this like corner here. If we hit 3, you'll see that we have these nice smooth transitions between them. Okay, so we're going to hit 1 again just to get back to the rough mode. 3 is a preview. We actually have to apply the smooth. So again, we're going to go to the hot box. We're going to go to Mesh, and we're just going to go to Smooth. It's like in the middle. So Mesh, Smooth, and that should smooth out our surface. Okay, so we had it selected, Mesh, Smooth. You can click off of it. once you're done, and you'll see that it's nice and smooth. Okay. You'll also see that Pacman is floating like halfway between it. All right, so he's not perfectly like in his area that he should be. So what I'm going to do is grab the ground, go to the move tool, and just pull the ground up until Pacman's inside. Okay, I don't want to pull it up so he's like sticking through. I just want to pull it up until he's inside it. All right, let's save as and call this number 2. All right, so now we're going to add some color to it. So we're going to grab Pacman and all the Pacman pieces. So we have to go in close. You can use Control-Shift if you want to add all the pieces. Or just Shift to add them in. But we have to grab 4 pieces because there's 4 parts of Pacman that we have to grab. Okay. So once you have those 4 parts of Pacman, let me show this too, just for fun. Let's say I want to grab all the pieces of Pacman, and I want to do it pretty quick. I can marquee Pacman. That gives me the background, it gives me the curve selected. I don't want any of that stuff. So then I can use Control and just marquee to deselect the things I don't want. Okay? So that's where those selection tools can really come in handy, trying to grab, especially when you have a lot of things. All right? So we have Pacman selected. I'm going to go to the Layers palette over here. And we have a layer called, it's not in this one because my file crashed. We have a layer called Setup. Okay? We're going to make a new layer, and we're going to double click it and call it Pacman. Okay, so make a new layer, that far right button in the layer box, and label it Pacman. And then if we turn the V off, we should see that all those Pacman pieces are now gone. Alright, so now that we have that layer there, we're going to put the other stuff on layers too. So we can click the ground, make a new layer, and call that ground. And then hide it. And I'll grab the path and the balls and call that path and balls. And I'll hide that as well. Okay, so when I look around at your screen, I should see nothing there. Everything's on layers, nice and hidden. Okay, now the reason we added these layers here is so that it's easier for us to texture it and to color it. Okay, so when I'm trying to grab the path and the balls and I'm trying to set those up, I turn it on, set it up, I'm good. Turn it off, go to the next thing. Okay, it makes it much easier to do. Think of an entire room. If we're trying to color every single thing in this room, it's very difficult to do unless we isolate individual objects. Okay, so we're going to do a couple of these. We'll do the texturing today, and the next class we'll do the rendering part. So we're going to turn on the path and balls. We're going to marquee all the path and balls, and we're going to assign a material to it. So we hold down the space bar. We go to Lighting and Shading, Assign Favorite Material, and Blend. Lighting and Shading is on the bottom left. You might have to, if you open your hotbox way down here, come on. Your hotbox doesn't want to open. There it goes. So if you open your hotbox way down here, you can't see it. So you have to hold it open up here. And then you can get to Lighting and Shading, Assign Favorite, Blend. Blend, B-L-I-N-N. Okay? This is it's called a shader, and essentially it's meant to emulate something. Definition, a blend is a basic material used for creating looks for surfaces with broad highlights. Is that it opened up the attribute editor. Again, this is one of those things that's taking our screen and it's adjusting it and refreshing it and kind of screwing us up. So we pull it out. So pull the attribute editor out so it's just kind of floating. Okay?
Could you explain how we get into that again? I'm sorry.
So we're going to hold down the space bar.
Yeah.
lighting and shading, assign favorite,
Okay.
and then blend. And that will open up the attribute editor, then you can pull it off to the side. What we're doing too with this blend is we're creating a definition. What does this material or what does this object look like for this? Now if we had 1,000 of these spheres, we create one definition and that covers the 1,000 of spheres. If we had 3 spheres, same thing. If we had one that was red and one that was blue and one that was yellow, then we could create 3 different definitions for what that's supposed to look like. Okay? So we're going to call this blend up at the top. We're going to call this pellets. There you go. Okay? Then we're going to pick on a color. This is the color swatch right here. So we just click on that color swatch and then pick a color. Alright, so it has a color on there. Right now it looks white. Okay? If you were to zoom in, you'd see that it does have color. You don't need to zoom in. I'm going to scroll down under specular shading. And this is where we can control how sharp or how broad that specular is, how broad that highlight is. So I'm just going to take the eccentricity up, the specular roll-off down. Okay? Eccentricity goes up, specular roll-off goes down. Keep going to the right, Sam. On the tab, see the little arrow? To the far right.
Right here?
The other right.
Okay.
Okay, so this is going to give us an even broader highlight than the default is. We're also going to go under Special Effects and change the glow intensity to 0.01. We're not calculating everything. Right now it's just showing us a display of what the color looks like. Okay, so if we come up here to our bar and you see the little clapper with the blue on it, the one next to it, the plain one with nothing fancy, if we just click that, we'll get to see what these things look like in render view. Okay, so now we could adjust some of our stuff. We're not going to worry about it right now. Okay, like I could go in here and say, oh, I want the glow to be bigger, make the glow bigger, and then it'll be like that, and that's too much, and then we adjust it again. Okay, 0.01 is going to be a fine glow for what these guys are doing. Okay, so let's close that window. Close that window, the attribute editor. Turn the path and balls off. Turn Pacman on. And then we'll grab Pacman, Hotbox, lighting and shading, assign favorite material, whoops, and then do another blend. Okay, and let's call the material Pacman material. And then we'll pick a color for Pacman. And Pacman is essentially just yellow. You can adjust this color if you want, make them blue, purple, I don't care. I'll make them gold just for fun. On Pacman, I'm just going to take my eccentricity up just a tiny bit. He doesn't need a glow, so he's good there. Alright, so we close that. Okay, we can render it again. Just hit the render button again if you want to see what Pacman looks like. You could hit the F key to frame him, render him so you can see him closer. It's not going to be anything fancy. Okay, wonderful. Alright, so let's turn Pacman off, turn the ground back on. Am I going too fast for this part? No objections. Alright. So now we're going to go to the ground. Same thing, except instead of blend, we're going to go to ramp shader. Okay. The ramp shader allows us to vary things depending on how we're looking at it. Okay. So if you looked at a car, the reflections for a car dead on are different than the reflections off to the side. The stuff that's facing you is different. That's typically where the ramp shader came in. We're going to use that to do this Pacman scene. Pacman. Come on. There it is. So in this, essentially everything that's facing the camera, we want to be black. And then everything that's not facing the camera, we want to be this purpley color, okay, or whatever color you pick. So that's what this guy does here. So see, this color is like a ramp, like an After Effects ramp, a gradient, okay? So we're going to click on the color and pick a color. So I'll pick purple just because that's the Pacman color-ish. Something like that, okay? It's going to color everything that same color. So I'm going to change that because there's no more colors in this bar. There's only one color. So if I click at the other end of this, you'll see that it adds another color. Then I can click on my little swatch and color that black. Okay, so I have two colors. The right color is what I'm looking at directly head on. The left color is what I'm looking at or what's on the other edges. Okay, good so far? Good. I'm going to change my color input from light angle to facing angle. And then if I hit the render button again, we should see something along these lines. I'm going to scroll down until I get to special effects. There it is. And for my glow intensity, I'm just going to put 0.1. And then render it again and see how it looks. That's kind of cool. Maybe 0.2. 0.25. All right, that's good. Okay. Let me pull this up so you guys can actually see what we're seeing. Here we go. Okay, now remember what I said. This is based on the angle. So right now I'm kind of above this. If I change my view and I get at this angle like this and I render it, I'm going to see a lot more of that purpley color. If I go basically dead on from above by switching to the top view and render it, I should see pretty much black with that glowing color in there. Okay? So just be aware that this kind of thing is going to depend on how you're looking at this. Let's switch that back. Okay, so now let's turn the path and balls on. Let's turn Pacman on. We'll look at it from a top view and then render it and then just see how everything's kind of coming together. Beautiful. It looks wonderful. I'm going to take my glow down a little bit. Okay, I'm going to turn the glow down on my ground. It's a little bit too glowy, so I just click on the plane. Hit Control A to open the attribute editor. That'll be another one of your hotkeys. I think we listed that at some point. Yes, under your miscellaneous. And then under the ramp shader, I can just turn that glow down. That's better.
Where did you adjust the glow at?
On the ramp shader, I just adjusted the glow intensity to 0.15. Everything that we do is going to be based on your numbers. It's not going to be based on mine. You're not trying to create an exact replica of what mine is. If we're teaching a painting class, we don't go through and I say make a 3/4 inch stroke from this corner to that corner or whatever. You know, we go in there saying here's how you make a stroke, and then you apply that to your painting, right? So we could adjust this thing all day. We're not going to. We're going to leave it right where it is for today. Okay. So now let's click off and save as. And let's call this one number 3. Okay. And then let's close Maya down.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
When you're doing the shading and you want to go back into it and like adjust
And
it, how would you?
That's where you click on any whatever object has it. So if I'm adjusting the pellets, I can grab any pellet and then hit Control A. Okay. This is kind of like everything about that surface is here. So I click on Control A and I can go through these tabs until I find the one I called pellets, and then I can adjust what that pellet material looks like. Okay. Any of those options we chose in the channel box where we adjusted the opening and closing of the mouth, or we adjusted how many divisions we had, all those can be accessed from the attribute editor too. Okay. Now there's further stuff that we'll get into of, I'll show you the hypershade. This is where it lists all of your materials. So if we needed to edit any materials, we can come into this and edit a material. Okay, and here's all the different kind of material definitions that we have. So if we're making a crate, we can have a crate material. If we're making a wooden table, we have a wooden table material. If we're making a glass ball, we have a glass ball material. All right. When you get to the advanced classes, this thing is loaded. There's like 50 shaders in here, 100 shaders in here, because every single object needs its own shader. This monitor has this black plastic on it. This one has black plastic with this metal thing. So then I would have two different materials for this one material for that one, but because these two blacks are basically the same, I can use the same black material for this, but a different material for that. Okay? If I have something glowing like this light, that's one material. If I have some transparency on the outside of this, that's another material. Okay? The glass right here, that's another material. So everything that we try to recreate in 3D, we have to kind of figure out what these settings are for it and make it try to look as good as we can. The stuff we're doing here with blends and ramp shaders, that's beginner stuff, okay? That's why it's a beginner class. Eventually on the next assignment, the car one, we're going to get into more realistic ones, okay? These ones aren't going to get us to look photorealistic. When we get to the next set, they're going to start looking a lot more realistic. And when we get to the third one, we're going to get even more realistic stuff, okay? So don't think that these are, I can make something look like real wood or real brick using one of these straight out of the box. We can't, okay? All right, so save your stuff. Let's shut Maya down. And let's back up our preferences and back up our file. Okay, so first thing we do after Maya is closed is we go to the documents or the D drive or wherever it is. We go to Maya and we find that 2015 folder inside Maya and we right click and we copy it or cut it. Cutting it's always better. Then we go into our folder and then we right click and we paste it. And then you can say yes to overwrite. The other thing you can do is just delete the folder you have in there and then paste the other one in. Cut it, my folder, paste it. Okay, so I backed up my preferences. I backed up my preferences and backed up anything else. So then we have the 2510 folder. You have your preference folder. You want to make sure you start backing these things up. You want to make sure you put them on a thumb drive or a Dropbox or somewhere, because now we're starting to get to that point of needing to save these. When we come in next time, we're working on these even more. So we need these files.